gonna be weird. Doing online only. We'll get through. So why is this mic still loud still? Last time I had to deal with a mic like this. Anyway, so I might as well start off with that. That's one thing I am excited for is I actually get to set up a more permanent streaming setup. Right now I have the mic for the room, and I'm just using my laptop mic for the stream. And I tend to pace back and forth when I'm lecturing a bit. So if you ever notice this sound coming in and out a little bit, it's because I'm pacing in the lecture hall. So things like that will go away. I'll just be set up at my desk. I actually bought a nice mic for streaming. I don't even need a mic in this room anyway. I'm just going to take this mic off. So I bought a nice mic for streaming, but I've never really had a chance to use it because I'm not going to lug it around to every lecture. I did buy a nice lapel mic too, but I just never bothered setting it up. It's actually in my backpack right now. I have this nice mic, but I don't use it at all because I just haven't bothered setting it up. And this mic's only hooked up to the room. But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. In a sense it is, but let's talk about the structure moving forward and some of the changes that we can expect. So I made a post on Piazza. If you haven't seen that post yet, check that out. It doesn't have too many specific details. It's more of an overview. And some of the specific details, of course, it's still unsure. It's all up in the air. We haven't had too much time to plan for this. But I can at least give you a general overview, a general idea of what to expect looking forward. First of all, today's lecture, there's no slides and there's no lecture question. So there's nothing new to do today. There's enough on all of our plates. We don't need another lecture question just jamming up things. So no lecture question, no new slides. When I do get to lecture content, we're going to go through the examples of yesterday, where I'm going to use the debugger and show exactly how these things work, and show a few optimizations that the compiler and the JVM can do for us when we are using a functional programming approach and when we're using these concepts, especially if we're using them appropriately. Some of the things that happen behind the scenes that help us out. So we'll get to that, and if we don't, if you have tons of questions, we can just talk about the online only format the whole time. I'd be cool with that. Anyway, from the last 5 lectures, you have all the content that you need to complete the homework. So you have everything that I need you to know about functional programming. It's already out there. And the pattern of the course has been going. The 6th lecture of each learning objective has been examples in live coding. So if we cut into that a little bit, I'm not gonna cry about that. You do have the content that you need. So let's talk about logistics. Anybody have open questions first? And if you have questions, just shout them out too. Okay, so the first question about questions themselves. As we move to a more online format, so the labs are kind of the big question mark. I'm confident we'll find a solution. The TAs have been making tons of suggestions. There are a lot of options for us for the labs moving forward. The specific platforms that we'll end up using are still undecided. We're going to shop around. The TAs and I are going to test some things out over break and see what platforms are going to work best for our needs. What platform specifically is going to fit our needs. For the labs, the activities, the quizzes, and all those, that will pretty much be business as usual. I'll release the form or the doc or whatever it is that we're giving you, and then I'll have some time limit for that. I'll release it, and then in 2 hours, make your submission, and that's your lab. We can do lab from anywhere on the planet. You just don't have the live TAs standing right there with you. So not much is affected there. The interviews are the trickier part. We just got to figure out how to give you the interviews, how to have you do your interviews remotely. But there are tons of technologies to be able to do that. We just have to figure out which one's going to be the best suited for that goal. What about lecture questions? Lecture questions aren't affected at all. There's no lecture question today, but that's just because there's no lecture question today. But the regular lecture questions, I mean, you submit them online, you get them through lecture streamed. A lot of that's business as usual. The lab's the big question. So about questions themselves, which we're seeing right now, those of you live maybe not seeing it as much, but I'm going to rely on the Twitch chat a lot more. The Twitch chat is going to be much more prevalent in the course. It's been fairly dead most days, but since we don't have live questions, you can't raise your hand and just ask a question. I'm going to be relying on that Twitch chat. This is the big reason why I use Twitch. There are a lot of other streaming platforms I could use. I wanted one with that live chat. That was important for the lectures. Before this whole situation, before we're going to online only mode, I wanted that because not all students want to raise their hand and ask a question in front of potentially hundreds of their peers. In the 1 p.m. lecture, we have almost 200 students enrolled. If everyone shows up, which they don't, but if everyone was there, that's 200 people. You got to raise your hand and ask a question. What if you ask a stupid question? What if Jesse makes fun of me? There's a lot of stress there. I do sometimes make fun of students who ask questions. I try not to, but sometimes I can't resist. I got to give an example now because that sounds awful. If I say something and I say, the answer to this question is 10, and then somebody asks, what's the answer to this question? Like literally right after I say it, I got to give them a little sass. I just can't help myself in that. Like, I just said that. Pay attention if you're going to ask questions. But anyway, so Twitch chat is going to be what I'll rely on heavily for the live interactions during the lectures. Since you don't have that live option anymore. I always wanted that option because then people can ask those questions on there. And if somebody asks that silly question, I don't have to give them sass on this chat. My TAs can just do that. They can, or other students. I can just ignore that question. It's harder to ignore a question when they stop the lecture and ask it. So Twitch chat is going to be a much more prevalent role. Yeah, Shadow, I get more viewers than you because I'm awesome. Try streaming better. Is that rude? Maybe that's one that is not appropriate. But what's up? Troll the chat?
No, are you getting trolled in the chat?
Control?
Troll. Making fun of you in chat. I think.
Oh, are they going to troll me in chat?
Are they doing it right now?
Oh, they always troll me in chat. I mean, there's always at least a little bit of that. I don't know how much of it's trolling, but. No, somebody was saying it feels bad, man, because I get more viewers than them.
Yeah.
I mean, I only have 20. But there will be more moving forward, I would suspect, I would hope. But, yeah, at least plus however many are here live. Yeah, I'm surprised so many of you are here, actually. I expected fewer of you. But thank you for covering, for the dedication. Because I did, or maybe you're the ones who didn't read Piazza. So I did recommend that you don't show up. But this is the last class. To be honest, I think I would show up too. I get where you're coming from. It's the last live lecture. Like, you're not going to get this opportunity again. So why not take advantage of it? Yeah, you won't. So it came up in the 1 p.m. Should I have a face cam? Because you're not going to be able to see my smiling face anymore. So I might set up a face cam. I bought that too. I bought some stuff anticipating doing more streaming, but I just don't want to haul a whole setup to each lecture. I can set some more of that up. I got a nice webcam, nice mic, and all that stuff. So maybe I will set it up as a webcam. I just hate seeing my face on the stream, but I think I'm just going to have to get used to that. So I might set up a webcam. We'll see. We'll see. What's up? Yeah, and I might game on the Twitch. Probably not. Hartloff gaming maybe.
10 minutes before lecture.
There won't be. And no Prime subs. You won't hear me saying, "Hey, don't forget you can use your Twitch Prime if you have Amazon." You won't hear me say that. If I got the invite to be an affiliate, I could open it for subs and bits and all that stuff. I'm not going to do that because once I do that, anyone who's not subbed has to watch ads. I'm not going to add ads to an educational channel. It just doesn't seem right at all. So there won't be any subbing, any of that stuff. But that's because, but what we get is nobody has to watch an ad. There's no ad when you open my stream. That's what I want. I want to keep it that way. Streaming GTA 5. No. Yeah, I'm not going to stream any gaming, but unless it's related to CC116, I suppose. So it does have CS in the name. Yeah. That's right. We'll table that. We'll think about it. All right. So Twitch chat, that's going to be the big thing. I'll monitor Twitch chat more often. I'm usually looking out at all y'all when I stream, or when I'm giving lecture. But with the new setup, I'll be keeping an eye on chat more often. I'll get more TAs in there to mod and things like that. especially the lecture after this. I usually only have one TA in there. So if somebody wants to troll me during that lecture, they have too many opportunities to do that. So Twitch chat is going to be the main interaction during lecture. It's already been in place, business as usual, no big deal. But you will be watching lecture on Twitch. That's your only option now. That's the big change. I'll communicate with you throughout the break as I make these more structural decisions. But what I would like to do is restructure the lecture timing if I can get away with it, depending on what your other classes are, if you can make other times. And if not, I might just say watch the VOD. That might be my stance for that. Right now I have 3 sections of 116, and since it's live sections, I have to give the same lecture 3 times a day. It's just very repetitive. If it's streamed just once, if I give the normal lecture content from like 1 to 2, then I can use the rest of that time to have more interactive lectures. I can interact with chat a lot more, give more examples. If there's an example that just didn't make sense, I can go over it again. And if you show up, if this is the only time that you have to be able to watch the stream, then I can just defer you to the VOD from the 1 p.m. lecture. If you want to watch the standard lecture, go here, and then have the other times be for more interaction. Then I might switch the hours. I might go like 1 to 4 or even 1 to 5. I might stream on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I might switch that up a bit. So I see that as an opportunity, and overall my general stance is I'm kind of excited about this, to be honest. There's more opportunities now that we're not restricted to physical rooms. So for lectures, if I can get away with it, the word from up above is saying you have to stick to the regular schedule times if you expect students to be there and watch live. So I just won't expect you to watch it live, and then I can get away with, I can satisfy that restriction and still do more innovative ideas and more interesting ideas for lecture. Same with labs. We're restricted to 25 max cap for labs. So what I'd like to do is collapse those labs into like 3 or 4 lab times, give those times available, and then have everyone choose a new lab time. And if people who can't make any of those times will make adjustments and make accommodations accordingly. But we don't have to have these labs all throughout the week because we don't have that space constraint. So there's some opportunities to be able to clean up the logistics of the course a bit. And for lab, you know, at each of those 3 or 4 times, let's release a doc to everybody. You can go through the doc, go through the form, just like you normally would sitting in lab. At the 2-hour mark, the form shuts off. You gotta make your submissions. I don't foresee too much logistical changing there. The TA interviews can happen outside of lab. So right now, you're working on a lab, you're working on the lab doc, you're going through the form and everything. And then TA calls your name, you gotta put that down for 10 minutes, go over to the TA, do your interview, and then come back. Your whole train of thought's disrupted and everything. We don't have that problem anymore. We can schedule the TA interviews at separate times. Again, I'll announce what the official thing is that we're going to end up doing, but it's probably going to be each TA is going to put up their times. You sign up for a 10-minute time slot with the TA, and then you interview on whatever platform we decide at that time. So the scheduling should get a bit cleaner for that one. Instead of showing up to lab, and then if your UBIT is last alphabetically, you're probably going to be called last, and you got to sit there and wait for your name to be called. You know, things like that are going to get a little bit cleaned up, I think. I'm looking forward to that as more opportunities. I had another thought and then I lost it. The office hours are going to obviously be online only, but Piazza is going to be much more prevalent. That's going to take a more major role in the course. If you have any questions where you have to share any personal information or what we call the student record. So there's this act, the FERPA. It's an act that says we can't share your student record data, which includes course enrollments, grades, and anything related to your academic progress. So there are certain platforms that we use that are called FERPA compliant, which means that they said, don't worry, we're not going to, if you share student record information on our platform, we're not going to share that with anyone else. We're not going to do anything malicious with it. Piazza is one of those platforms. So if we need to talk about grades or anything, it's email, which I'd like to avoid just because it's so disorganized. Email's a mess, just by its nature. Or Piazza, making private posts on Piazza. This has already been the policy. If you need to talk about code, make a private post on Piazza. But a lot of you could have ignored that because you can just go to office hours with your laptop and talk to us then and talk about your code then. Now that the office hour, live office hour with your laptop option is off the table, a private post on Piazza, that's our main way of getting help with your code. And if you need to talk about your grade, if you didn't get a learning objective, you thought you completed it, but you got a 0 for it, and you have questions about the feedback in AutoLab, that's got to happen on Piazza or email. On both of those platforms, I'll have more of a presence on both of those platforms moving forward. I'll have to give Piazza and my email a lot more attention than I currently do. Piazza I pretty much leave to the TAs, and my email, if you've sent me an email, you probably know I'm very slow turnaround with email. So I'll get caught up on my email and then be more up to date on that as well, since that's your only way of contacting me. Because now I'm like, people send me a lot of, I don't want to go on this tangent too much, but people send me a lot of office hour and Piazza questions in my email. They'll just send me a screenshot of their code and say, fix this for me. And not that rude, but that's the general thing what they're asking. And I typically ignore those because I'm like, there are many other avenues. Like, come to my office hours. There's a designated time and place for you to do this. But once that time and place is gone, I don't have that excuse anymore. I got to be more quicker with those emails. But even then, I'll be like, why are you not posting this on Piazza where you have an army of TAs that can help you? Why does it have to specifically be me? I always wonder that in the emails too. It doesn't have to be me specifically to post on Piazza. So that's why such a slow turnaround. I got an inbox full of that kind of stuff. That doesn't need to be an email to me. So yes, bless you. So my office hours. So Piazza is the main place if you need help with your code specifically. We'll also have more group office hours. If you, like, I'll have some of my office hours on Twitch. So in addition to the lectures, or this might just be rolled into the lecture thing, I'll have more of like a block of time where I'm streaming, and some of that will blend into office hours. I might also have some office hours on like Tuesdays and Thursdays where I'm streaming and it's just whatever chat wants, you know, let's talk about it, let's do it as a group. I'll also have some personal office hours, is that the right word for it, where I'll be active on Piazza, and the TAs will have many of these, where we're going to be active on Piazza, and I'll actively check my email and things like that during those times. So when you have those questions about your grade, about your specific code, you can still have an opportunity to ask me those questions as well. So I'll have public office hours and private office hours is probably how I'll designate those. Because the public, obviously in Twitch, you're not going to say, hey, I didn't get the grade I wanted or something. We can't do that for a lot of reasons. Not the least of which is your username is anonymous. If you're like, hey, how did I do on that assignment? Here's my U-bit. How do I know that's actually you and you're not just trying to get your friend's grades or something like that? There's a lot of problems with that. And of course the FERPA, it's illegal to do that. So I'll stream office hours. I'll also have private office hours. Some of the TAs will also have Discord office hours. I'm not going that route, but some of the TAs will have the Discord office hours, and some of them have been doing that already. Discord, you cannot post your code on Discord, even if it's a DM to a TA. You can't talk about private records there. Discord is not FERPA compliant. Discord does not claim, well, it's FERPA compliance doesn't mean all that much, but it does mean that they're saying they're not going to share that record with anybody. Discord does not claim such a thing. So if you do expose student records on Discord, they are not even claiming that they won't share that with somebody else. So it's an obvious FERPA violation. We can't do that. That said, it's your record. I think there's nothing wrong with you sharing your own record. You are the ones who control that. But I can't encourage that. I'm not going to encourage that, and I'm certainly not going to do that, and I'm not going to encourage my TAs to do that. So any code that's posted at that point, which isn't even part of the student record, but I'm going to play it a little safe there. Any code that's posted, we're going to keep that on Piazza so we can talk about your code. Because usually if we're talking about your code, somewhere in there you're going to say, I got objective 1 but not objective 2. At that point, it's a student record. And that's going to be something that could get a lot of people in trouble, mostly me. So not gonna risk that one. There's already been questions and a lot of conversations behind the scenes with my colleagues. Just streaming on Twitch could bring that into question with FERPA. I've looked into everything. I don't see any violation there. As far as I can tell, everything's clean with that. But even that, some of my colleagues have been questioning that. be careful, you know, is that a FERPA violation? My response is, I don't know if you understand FERPA, but I have to have those conversations with them. We have to go through all the legal documentation and make sure. So, so there's that. So Discord and Twitch, anything on those platforms, we're not going to share any of your record, any of your enrollment information. We're not even going to confirm or deny that you are registered for the class. For Twitch, like people can be on Twitch who are not part of the class, and that's, I think, a good thing. If people want to learn, let them. But that also helps us with FERPA. Nobody can even identify who's enrolled in the class. Whereas something like Piazza has to be FERPA compliant, because the very first thing I do when I set up a Piazza class is upload the roster. That's a student record. They have to at least claim that they're not going to share that with somebody else. Okay. So Discord and Piazza for office hours. A lot of the TAs, all of the TAs, I gotta say a lot. All of the TAs, I'm leaving the choice up to them how exactly they want to conduct their office hours. But if they want to stream Twitch, do live Discord, live chat on Discord, or if they want to go on Piazza where they can talk about sensitive information with you in private posts. Those would be the three options that they have available to them. I'll confine them to those three, but I'm going to leave it up to them which ones they choose. And I'll make sure we at least have a good amount of them who are going to do Piazza office hours, since that's the only place where you can say, here's my code, here's my bug. What do I do? Don't ever, this was in the Piazza post, but I think it's worth repeating. Don't ever DM your TAs or myself on Discord. Just don't do it. It's not cool. It's not courteous. What's the word I'm looking for? I'm blanking on it. What is it?
It sounds like professional.
Yeah, it's not very professional for sure. There's it violates etiquette. It's not very etiquette. That's fine ethically, but it just violates some online ethics. I said ethics. Online etiquette. I think it's just not the right thing to do.
We also won't answer them.
Yeah, and I'm telling all the TAs, don't answer them. Don't reply to DMs. There is one TA who actually wants to communicate via DMs. So if that one TA contacts you and invites you to DM them, you know, it's whatever. I'm not going to get involved with that. But the normal policy is don't DM your TAs or myself. And then an exception can be made for that one TA. If you need to contact us more privately, that's what Piazza's for. Make a private post to instructors on Piazza. That's what that's for. Not Discord. Labs, lectures, office hours. I think those are the three big things I wanted to talk about. Any questions, any concerns, or anything about this? Yes? What is to do for the project? So there is, I saw that in the 1 p.m. I forgot to respond to it. So there is no group project this semester. So I'm going to do business as usual with that. So there always has been a group project, but I've modified that a bit. There is a project. I haven't talked about this very much. We just haven't gotten to that part of the semester where it's time to talk about it. But I'll give you a quick prelude, a quick introduction to the project. So for the project, there's going to be two options, just like the homeworks. And I'm going to have a project that's there, it exists, it's a thing already. Your task for the project is to make a contribution to that, add a feature to this existing project. So I want to get you practice reading through an existing code base that might be a decent sized code base and being able to add something to it. And it's going to be through GitHub, so it's going to involve forking a repository, making your changes, committing, pushing to that repository, and then creating a pull request into my repository. So we're going to get into some software engineering aspects of that. More of the logistical, like when you're working on a team, on a project together, how do we even do that? So that's some of the questions I'm asking for that. Less so break into groups of 4 students and work together, which is a good thing because I might have to, if I was planning to do that, I probably would be scrapping it right now. So it's business as usual the way I had it planned. And with this class specifically, there are so many problems with the group project. It's pretty much every single group is going to have at least one person who does nothing. And that's just all kinds of issues, and I got to deal with a lot of it. So it's just too early. And the upper level classes, group work works a bit better. But at this point in time, I mean, a lot of your classmates just aren't going to continue with computer science. At this point, some of them are realizing that they just don't want to be here. They don't want to code for 15 hours on end until 5 in the morning. And, when you get someone like that in your group, it's just nothing but problems. I mean, programming isn't easy. It's not. It takes a lot of dedication too. So I feel bad losing those students, but I mean, some people just don't want to spend that much time in front of a computer. I understand, I get that. But when you get one of those people in your group, well, now that's hurting other students, and I just can't have that. I've had it before. I've tried a lot of ideas to try to minimize the damage that can do. I did individual grading last semester. Even though it was a group project, I graded everybody individually, and that kind of worked, but it just wasn't great. So this semester I got a new idea. Well, we'll just have 2 projects, and everybody contributes to these 2 projects, and it's going to work a lot better. And my plan is to host those projects too, so you can actually, if your functionality, your feature that you added is working, I might not get fully to this, maybe I shouldn't even say it in case I don't, but if your feature is working and it helps the app, I'll host it on the live server, and then the whole class can use your feature. And one of my ideas for this was to do a quiz app, where you can upload quiz questions, and then it helps everybody study for, then everybody can use your questions, and everybody can study for their upcoming exams. But then I pitched that to my Ts, and they're like, that exists, it's Quizlet. So I might not do that just because it already is out there. But I might still do it anyway, just because it's something we can build and something relatable. Hell, I still have to look at Quizlet to see what it is exactly, but if it sucks, I mean, maybe we can make something better. It's possible. Anyway, if there are no more questions, let's get into some content. What about the open-ended software? Like, can we do more than one if we want? You can do as many as you want if you want. You can only get 1 credit for one, though. I ain't gonna stop you from writing more software. The open-ended software, I was planning to get the logistics ready over spring break anyway, so over the break I'm gonna work on the logistics of this. I'll at least have a form where you can submit your open-ended project ideas for approval, so you don't work on an open-ended thing and then after you write the software, have me or TA say, no, that doesn't count. So I at least want that approval process in place over spring break. But you can only do 1 of those. If you don't want to do any of the open-ended software, you always have that option of doing a second homework extension. And I want to talk about the logistics of homework extensions as well. I got to set deadlines. I don't know exactly what they're going to be, but if a homework, this was never my intent, but I didn't communicate it so well that this wasn't my intent. The expansion objectives are not due at the same time as the homework is due. You still have time to do those homework extensions later on in the semester. I don't know exactly how much time you have. I want to give you tons of time. Those weren't supposed to be a time pressure thing. I want them, like each homework, you focus on the homework and the learning objective, and then after all the homeworks are done, you look back, which one was the least painful? Let me go to the expansion objective of that one because I enjoyed that one the most, and then dive a little deeper into that one. During that project time, where the content is starting to calm down. Like there's no more content after the 5th learning objective. It's more higher level, how do we design software, how do we engineer software, how do we use Git and GitHub to share code and things like that. So while the technical content shuts off, that's my intent is that's when you're starting to think about the expansion objectives. Of course, if you got it done already, no worries, like you don't have to think about that. It's one less thing you have to worry about later. But I never intended that to be a time pressure. I didn't communicate that very well of saying, hey, if you're working on the homework and the deadline's coming up, don't stress too much about that expansion objective, which only 4 students have already, so I didn't do too much damage there. Only 4 students have done an extension objective so far. But for the ones coming up for genetic algorithm, you're stressing about that neural network that's not going to be due at that deadline. So don't think that's due right at that deadline.
You know, homeworks 4 and 5 will have extension opportunities.
Yeah, probably. So my plan is to get more extension opportunities out there. Recommendations will have an expansion objective as well. Genetic algorithm did. I wasn't able to get one for homework 2, but that's not to say I can't add an expansion objective to one of the homework 2 assignments as well. Those ones I just didn't have any good ideas for those. It's hard to add something to those. Both of them are pretty much complete apps as they are. If anything I add would have just been ridiculous. Like turn this into a scientific calculator or something. Like I didn't have a good like next step that's not outrageous. I almost added unary operators to the calculator. I think that would have been feasible, but I just didn't pull the trigger on that one. Like the plus minus button or factorial, any operator that just takes one operand.
How about like an order operations?
But without if statements, you can't do it. Conditionals. That was, I actually had a bonus objective on that homework last semester that was exactly that, and then I said for the bonus only you can use conditionals. I've talked with TAs about this, we brainstormed ideas. I just don't think you can do it without conditionals. It just can't really be done. I'm sure it can be, so those of you taking that as a challenge, don't dive into that one. If you do, let me know about it.
Yeah.
But
6 years
but-
later, I show.
yeah, with a PhD thesis. I did it. No control flow. I don't see a way you could do that. You need some control flow for that. It involves a stack at some point, and you got to say, well, stack is not empty to pop everything off the stack. Is the standard approach. I can't get rid of that well loop. All right, let's talk about some stuff. Let's talk about computers. One last call? Any other online-only mode questions? So I'll be communicating over break. Oh, one last thing I do want to say. So I'll be communicating over break. Piazza is going to be the main source of communication. That's where I'm going to make announcements. That's where you're going to go for your information. If I have important logistical announcements, they'll be pinned Piazza posts. That's where you're going to look for the crucial information. If it's very important announcements, I'm going to send an email to the class. I'll probably send just one email to the entire class. It'll be over break. Once I have decisions on a lot of the logistical questions, I'll make one big email send one big email to everybody in the class, and a big part of that email will be from now on, Piazza is where you check for notifications. Just in case, I know there's students out there who don't check Piazza, don't come to class, don't watch the streams, don't watch the videos. That email is my one chance to reach those students. And believe me or not, they are out there, and it's ridiculous, but they're just so disconnected. I have no way of reaching them. I struggle with that often. I mean, I don't, but if I want to reach them, I struggle with it. Usually they just end up failing, because what can I even do at that point? If you're ignoring 4 different streams of communication that I have to you, there's just not much they can do. So expect one big email over break once I have things restructured the way I want it, and then Piazza posts. That's going to be the main form of communication after that email. I'm rereading the same message. Okay, so let's take a look at these examples and see. I was going to have a conversation about this today. On the mid-semester reviews, somebody said the lectures are pointless because Jesse turns the lights down so low that I fall asleep. So I was going to have this conversation like, who wants the lights here? Who wants it? I'm not going to bother since this is our last live lecture. It's kind of a pointless thing to talk about at this moment. I actually meant to do that Wednesday. We were going to do that, but there's no point now. I'll leave them at this. It's a little brighter than I usually leave it, so hopefully you can stay awake. But when you're watching the stream, you can adjust your own lighting level to exactly what you want. So, an irrelevant point now. So let's step through this with the debugger and see what goes on when we run some code. So this is the immutable counter example, where we had to create a new counter every time we want to simulate a change to the counter. Let's run this debugger. Get my zoom. and start stepping through this, the first thing that we're going to see is we're going to call that immutable counter's constructor. We're going to create a state variable named counter. We're going to assign it the value of that argument for the constructor. The constructor is just a method call, something I don't talk about too much, but the constructor is just a method call. Just like any other method, it's going to go on the stack while we're in that constructor call. We're going to have a reference to the object that's being created in the keyword this. So we already have a reference to that object as it's being created, and whenever we use that keyword this, we're going to have a reference to that object. We're going to talk about this at 588 on the screen. We're going to talk about these throughout today's lecture. So just a reminder, just like the other times we talk about these things, these numbers don't have any intrinsic meaning to us. I'm only going to use them, one, to show that this is an object on the stack, because it does have some reference. That 588 doesn't have any true meaning, but it is somewhat of a representation of how the JVM is going to find the memory address where this actually is on the stack. But there's several layers of abstraction in between the actual RAM and this number. But we're going to use it to say, okay, this is something on the heap, and we're going to compare these two references to see if two references refer to the same object or not. That's the only way I'm going to use them. So this at 588 is being created. We get the state variable assigned to the argument, and then any code outside of all the methods is executed. That's where we can do our initialization setup. So there's no code outside of the methods, so we hit the end of that code block after running everything outside of the methods, and this returns that new object, that new 580, whoops. Oh, I gotta step one more to get the assignment. We'll get a 588, at 588, that reference that was in this during the constructor call is now in this counter variable after the constructor returned that reference. Now we have a reference to that object on the heap. Now we're going to start our recursive call. We're going to update this thing 20 times. We get a call with n equals 20, counter equaling that counter, that 588 that we created. Our base case is false. Our first recursive step is false. We're not negative, so we have an n greater than 0. We're going to make this call. We have to resolve all the expressions for the arguments. One of those includes creating a new counter, and this is where we get our immutable counter. So we're calling this from at 588. That's what's in this. So this dot counter is going to be that value of counter, which is 10. We're going to add 1 to it and then call the constructor again. So we're constructing a brand new object at 589. We know it's a new object on the heap. That's going to be this for this one. The argument was 11, so counter is going to be 11. No code to run outside of the methods. We're going to return that and give that to the next step of our recursion. Decrement n by 1. And make the next recursive call with that new object, 589, and my new value of n, 19. So we added 1. Where are we? We added 1. We have a counter with an increment of 1 on the counter, and we decremented n by 1. So we do this 20 times. We're going to end up with a counter with 30 as its value and n as 0 and get that base case. So any questions on how that runs? That was reviewed how this thing runs. Great. Cool. So given everything we know about recursion and how this stuff works, I have this commented out in the repo. But what if I didn't? Do we expect this to run with update counter of 1 million in some counter? Do we expect this to work, given everything we know about recursion and what's going on with our immutable objects? Yes, I have a yes.
Yeah. I don't think it will.
And we have a no. Oh, team's forming.
Wait, so it's
I think it's gonna overflow.
And you
like
think
belief.
over and over for 1 million times.
Wait, can I see the fixate counter function?
Let's see. It worked. I would like to think it wouldn't work also, but this does work. So what we would expect to happen is 1 million, or hell, 1 billion. 1 billion frames to be put on the stack. We would expect that to overflow the stack, and that would blow everything up, and it wouldn't work. With 1 billion, it at least takes a little bit of time, but it still ends up running. We're also creating 1 billion new immutable counters on the heap. So every time we want to make a change, we call that increment, we're putting a new counter on the heap. So this should be blowing up our stack, and it should be blowing up our heap. But it's actually not doing either of those. But why? Why is this not, is my question. So let's take this one. No, I just want to hit my breakpoint, don't I? So let's address this one thing at a time. Let's start right here. And look at what happens when we call update counter of 20. And we're going to click through a little bit more than I did last time. So let's step into this thing. Oops. Step into this method. And get a few calls of this going. So let's get right here where n is 15. What we would expect to see is a lot of frames on the stack, but we actually don't get that. And this is specifically because of the way this code is set up. And that's what I want to talk about. We don't actually get that. We have our main frame on the stack, and we have one call to update counter where n is 15, and the counter is storing also 15? Yeah, so 15 and 15 happens to be for this case. As we go through, we're actually not getting more frames on the stack. This is one of the cases where the compiler can optimize for us. The compiler sees the structure that we have here and is able to rearrange things to get rid of that stack overflow that would be happening. So the compiler sees, specifically in this case, that the recursive call is the last thing that our method does. The last thing that happens in this recursive call. This is what we call tail recursion. When that recursive call is the last thing that's going to do, all this method is doing, this stack frame right here is doing, it's going to call this method, it's going to resolve the arguments first, and it's going to call this method, and whatever that method returns, this method is just also going to return the same thing. So this stack frame is done doing all of its work after it resolves the arguments. And when the compiler sees this, it says, look, all you're going to do, this whole frame is just sitting here waiting for a call, a return value from another frame. Why don't we just destroy this frame and say whatever this next frame is going to return, just return that to the calling frame and cut out the middleman. So that's what the compiler is doing for us here. It's saying, look, since the recursive call is the last thing you're doing, we're going to cut out the middleman, destroy this frame, and only put that other frame on the stack. So even when we get all the way down to our base case, we're still only going to have one frame on the stack when n is 0. So that's how we avoid blowing up our stack. To avoid blowing up the heap, that's where garbage collection is going to come into play. Each time we create one of these counters and then move on to the next recursive call, we no longer have a reference to that counter that we created. So we actually don't end up with 1 billion counters on the heap all at the same time. We get 1 billion counters total created and added to the heap, but as we fill up the heap space, the garbage collector is going to come around and say, you have all these counters on the heap, but you don't have references, you only have references to like 2 of them. So it's going to destroy all those other counters on the heap. We're going to add a lot more counters to the heap, and then the garbage collector is going to come around and say, no, you don't need any of these, and delete them. So the garbage collector is going to keep cleaning up after us as we're moving through, or else we would have a memory leak here, and we would blow up the heap, and we get an out of heap space error. We would get that issue. We don't get that error because even when we get to the base case, we only have one frame on the stack. We have one reference to a counter, and we have the references to counters in the main method itself. But we only have one real reference that we care about, and all of that was cleaned up as we went. So we actually get functionality out of this. Now mind you, at 1 billion, this was really slow because we still are asking for 1 billion objects to be able to go on the heap. Each one of these objects has at least an int and then possibly some overhead. So we have at least 8 gigs of RAM that we need to allocate and then garbage collect, allocate, garbage collect. That has to go through that cycle. And if we see, do I want to go through this today? You know what, I do. I did it in the other lecture. Let's do it here. So if we go to, hopefully I don't have something crazy on there. Nobody's saying anything bad, right? So if I run this, what we expect is to see a program named Java reach, there it is, we got it. We expect a program named Java to reach the top of our stack. This is running on the JVM, so it looks just like a Java program. And I can see I'm using up 1.35 gigabytes for this program. I'm not using up all, this is intentionally more than I have RAM on my machine to store all those ints. I'm not using up all that space, but apparently once I hit 1.35, that must be a magic number because that's the exact number we had in the morning lecture. Once we hit 1.35 gigs, that garbage collector is coming around, cleaning things up, and not letting me use more heap space than that. Which I'm surprised it lets me use that much. Usually you have to set special parameters if you want to use a bunch of heap space. So I found that interesting. Let's get rid of the spoilers. I accidentally spoiled that earlier. Let's look at our next example. This is the string example. I don't have time to recap everything that did happen with it. But let's look at this example, and there's 2 lines that I added to this that I want to talk about. Debug. So we'll get all the behavior we expect. I did click debug, right? Thinking, there we go. So we get all that behavior we expect that we traced through last time in the slides. But one thing that I want to point out is I have this new string that I created storing CSE 116. This is the original one that I stored in course, but I created that variable another string which also has the value CSE 116. Now this is a unique spot where since these objects are immutable, the compiler can say, hey look, you already have a string with the value CSE 116 on the heap. You want another one, another string with the value CSE 116 on the heap. I'm not going to create another string for you. All I'm going to do is return the reference to the string that I already created and give you that same reference, that same string that you already made. It's not going to make another copy of that string. When it can see this, it's not going to make another copy of that string. There are cases where this doesn't happen for us. For example, in this list that we created, the CSE 116s, those are all the same reference. So we always get that same string. But the CSE 250, CSE 116 is fun. We actually do get different references. We kind of tricked the optimization, tricked the caching on that one. Because we're building these strings with replace, happens to be the case in this instance. If we return a literal string, we create that literal string, CSE 250, and rerun this. I don't want to rerun it. You get the idea. That would be the same reference in this list than outside. So there's certain things that allow you to either optimize or not optimize that that code. That allows the compiler to optimize or not. The homework video for genetic algorithm talk about the expansion objective? Probably not. I the TAs do have the video ready for that too. I gotta review it and get it posted. It's one thing on my to-do list. So with this, the one thing I want to show here, quickly, where the hell am I? I put a breakpoint at the base case, and when we have the base case, this list that we create, this list that we create, n-1 primes with just the value 2, size 1, at 959 is the thing we want to look at. I want to step over a few times, get to the next level of the recursion. Oh, damn it. Get to the next level of the recursion. And I'm pulling out this next, which is n-1 primes.tail, which is a list containing all the elements except the first element in this list. When I do that, first, I have this new list of size 2 containing my first 2 primes, but the tail of that list, all the elements except the first one, is exactly 959. This is the exact same list that we had that only stored 2. So if you notice in the list example, you probably didn't notice, it's very subtle, but I was very careful to not say that the old lists were garbage collected, because they are not garbage collected. They are still on the heap. And whenever we prepend to a list, we don't actually create a whole copy of that list that's on the heap. We just create the first element, the element that we're adding, and then have that point to the old list. So each list is actually on the heap, but each list is only really responsible for a single element. So we're not wasting those lists that we created, specifically with prepend. If we use append, if we append to the end of a list, we don't get this optimization. We do get all those copies of the lists on the stack, on the heap that need to be garbage collected. So with that, I'm out of time.